maybe we can start because we have two speakers today. So, like I think it will be good if we can start, but I still see people are joining. Um, so first of all, I want to thank everyone to join today's webinar because today is a Friday, and I know like a lot of people are joining from all over the world, and like maybe it's really like in the evening or the night time in many part of the world. So I really want to thank all of you to join today's webinar. And like my name is Ia Banerjee. I'm the president-elect for International Indian Statistical Association. Maybe many of you know about our organization, but if you don't know, I just want to say like 1-2 words about the organization. So International Indian Statistical Association is an association of statisticians, data scientists, or the people whomever is working, in any aspect of the statistics. So in this organization, we promote education, research, and application of statistics and probability throughout the world with a special emphasis on Indian subcontinent. So we want to invite all of you, if you are not member yet, please become member and also, like follow our LinkedIn page and our, website to check all our updates. Okay. And I want to highlight one thing, like this organization does many things. Obviously, we're seeing like, webinar as one of the thing, but I want to highlight another thing that we have annual conference every year, and in the annual conference every year it's either in India or in US. So in 2024 the conference is happening in India and in Kerala. So if you get a chance, please be part of this conference, and you will get more information on our website and the LinkedIn page. So saying that, I want to now talk about the webinar. Like the whole purpose of this webinar series is to give people some flavor of statistics using in different areas. So I work in pharmaceutical company as a statistician in the drug development, and I remember when Abhirup came to me with the proposal of this webinar specifically on the health assessment technology. I was very excited to add, to do this because of the fact even the people who are working in pharmaceutical industry, they might not have a lot of experience to understand what is the health technology assessment. So this is our try to give you a flavor of like statistical analysis used in some area which probably we don't know, or we are not aware of it. So saying that, I want to give it to Abhirup, who is the moderator for today's webinar, and Abhirup is going to talk about he is going to give you like one background about health technology assessment. And I also want to acknowledge this webinar specifically today, like it's a joint collaboration with HTAi Society and IISA. And Abhirup, if you can come to the camera, I cannot actually see you, but I guess you are already. So Abhirup is the senior statistician in PharmaQuant Association, a PharmaQuant company, and also he's an active member in the Health Technology Assessment Society. So Abhirup, I would like to give you the floor, and please introduce to the speakers. Abhirup, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, can you see my screen at least?
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess you can see my slides, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me just start with here. So, So I'm very excited to be part of this webinar and moderate the session. Session is titled Health Technology Assessment and the Role of Statisticians. Please welcome to all of the participants for joining us, even on a Friday, I would say. So directly moving on to IISA, I think Ia has already mentioned in IISA does. But I will just take the moment to introduce you to HTAi. So HTAi is the only global society which is championing equitable, responsive, and cutting-edge health technology assessment. So HTAs members are dedicated to shaping. I think I'm having some issue here. Please. Oh yeah, now it's okay. Yeah, sorry. So HTA is the only global society championing equitable, responsible, and cutting-edge health technology assessment since 2003. And me myself, Jani, are active part of HTI, and Jani for more than me for quite a number of years. Now, this webinar is particularly hosted in association with IISA and HTAi DCIG, which is the Developing Countries Interest Group, which was formed in 2008 at the Montreal meeting. Now, DCIG performs a wide range of tasks, but the key aspect of this task of all the initiatives that DCIG takes is more or less about sharing experiences, discussing the needs and challenges that of the HTA and related aspects within developing countries, because HTA was initially developed from the perspective of the Western world or the developed countries. But this particular group has been focusing since 2008 on the needs and challenges and how to address the key aspects of the challenges that arises out of if HTA gets implemented and is getting implemented in these countries, and more focused from a developing countries perspective. Now, moving on to that, if similarly you can join us at HTI membership, and you can reach out to our technical officer Marilia at this email. Now, this is the agenda for today. I think I will be so there will be a welcome address by Dr. Hiya Banerjee, which has already done. I will already be speaking about. I will be introducing the speakers to the participants, and there will be presentations by our speakers, and there will be a Q&A session, and we can have an interactive discussion about what we think. So moving on to the introduction, I think we are very honored and pleased to have Dr. Liani Mueller, who is a faculty at the University of Pretoria teaching HTA, and she is one of the veteran medical devices HTA expert, working across domains, across areas, and she has been a pioneer in the African HTA. African HTA. Can you see my screen?
We can see your screen, but it's not in the presentation mode.
I think there's some issue with this. Let me just fix this. Very sorry for this. I don't know what has happened here. Can you see my screens now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I don't know what happened. So, and Yanni is currently the board member at HTI and also the associate editor at IGTHC, which is the HTI's official journal. Now, moving on to, we have our next speaker, Dr. Antonio Remiro-Azócar, who is the Methods and Outreach HTI Innovation Leader at Novo Nordisk, who will be actually speaking on the aspects of how a statistician plays a key pivotal role in market access for innovative medicines across disease areas. And he has been pivotal in methodological research for quite a long time now. And he has worked with in consultancy as well as industry and non-profit. Now, this is me, Abhirup. So I work as a senior statistician at Pharmaquant, and I mostly lead the indirect comparisons and HT assessments, even early value assessments. And also I'm part of the hospital-based HTA, patient involvement, and to some extent, I would say that rare disease interest group, mostly focusing on the economic methods of rare diseases. Now, I would give it to Gianni. Gianni, would you be sharing your screens or for the presentation?
Maybe it'll be better if you do, or would you like me to do it?
Okay. Then I can do it for you.
But Abhirup, your slides are not moving. So, can you
Yeah, your slides are not moving.
Okay, then okay. So I think there's some issue with WebEx maybe. So let me, I've stopped sharing. Then I think Yanni can move, presents. Yeah.
Yanni, you're on mute.
Yeah.
And we can see
Can
your
you see
screen.
my screen?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Good. Yeah. So. Okay. Thank you, IISA, for having me. And my task in this webinar is to introduce you to health technology assessment, what it is and what we do. And as Abhirup said, Antonio is going to delve deeper on what is actually the role of statisticians in technology assessment. Okay, so I'll tell you, and if it's not moving, please let me know, and I'll see if I can do something. So I'll give you a little snapshot of the history. What role does HTA play? What is the HT of the HTA, and why do we need it? Just a little bit on who does HTA and on the process. And I have some case studies or examples for you. And then as soon as we're done, then we can, really discuss. I'm sure you would like to know what does actually statisticians or or any other professionals, what is their role in HTA? So, history of technology. So it started out actually with technology assessment. With technology, we mean all kinds of technology that you can think about. You can see like pesticides, power plants, and also health technology like artificial heart. So it started out in the US in the mid 60s, and we as humans, we would also always like to know, what is this technology, what kind of role it is playing in the society. There are intended consequences for what it was developed, but there are also side effects, unintended consequences, harmful effects, and of course, before making those kind of any decisions on the technologies to be used for people, then for humans, then we would like to know, what are the effects and balance it. So it was introduced like 1965 in the House of Representatives. They were asked to do, assessments on those kind of technologies. When you read those, papers or the reports, it is quite interesting to see how, the development that has happened over the years. But there are many, many aspects of it that are still similar to what had been done before. So with the HTA agencies are public bodies, and they were established in the 1980s. For example, the Swedish agency SBU in 1987, and they were tasked to conduct these assessments, and they're public bodies doing these assessments, not private entities. And as Abhirup mentioned, we are members of Health Technology Assessment International. But before that, before even my time in 1985, it was called IISA and not HTAi. And there is a journal also called International Journal of HTA. And there, many of us also publish. You're also very welcome to, publish your manuscripts there. And then we have also a network of this public body, public agencies called INATA, and they are the ones, there are they have 53 agencies or members and covering 32 countries. So what is this health technology of health HTA? And I remember one of my first workshops that I conducted in Durban in South Africa. people after the workshop, people literally came to me and told me, Yani, I'm very disappointed. I thought it was, just a software that I could plug in and it'll give me all the answers that's necessary. So it's not only that. And people also ask me to change, lobby for changing the name of health technology, because technology is equipment, device, diagnostics, but it's also medicine and vaccines, or preventive educational programs, public health programs, so surgical procedure, whatever, the kind of programs that need a decision. So, and more we are looking into digital health technologies, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and so on. As in our daily lives, we are trying to, decide between one technology or two or three technologies and what value it is bringing us for the money we are going to invest, right? So there is the demand for better service. We as a patient are asking for that. We would like newer technology, innovative technologies, and so do the clinicians, the health professionals. Then, of course, there's rapid development of technologies, but also, on the other hand, limited budgets. And also, these technologies, are they innovative enough to be used, for example, in developing countries? Do they need to be redesigned? And this redesign, is it good? It is appropriate for us? Is it bringing value for the money that we are paying for it? So those are the kind of questions we are asking ourselves. And also, the technology in its life cycle, has it done its work? Should it be replaced by others that were, more environmentally, for example, has a bit better footprint than the one that is being currently employed? Or is it still safe or not? So those kinds of decisions that need to be made. More and more evidence that are being collected, and you can do what we are doing is some agencies are doing is technology reassessment, but not everywhere. And in many countries, it's also being used to define the benefit packages. But always, we're taking this global evidence, but we would like to use it in that context, take into consideration what is the need and what is the resources that are available. So my first case, this dual HIV syphilis rapid testing was being used in one of the hospitals and one of the clinics in South Africa. And then, but there were no, the decision to use this rapid RDT or the RDTs was not based on any evidence, but because it was being provided. So, we were asked to do this HTA, and we found, as you see, no, not necessarily any RCTs. Then the performance study showed that for HIV it was performing well, but for the syphilis, sensitivity was low. So we were asking ourselves, is it cost effective in that region or in that setting? And first of all, we needed to do the cost effectiveness study. And also, not only if it is cost effective, but if it is a single versus this dual, what kind of acceptance had it been for the profession, for the users, for the patients, and so on. And some of these RDTs were WHO pre-qualified, but not all. So at least, using HTA or rapid HTA, what we also call, would enable the use of evidence, the use of, a framework to guide decisions. coming back to HTA, why, what do you use for, our reasoning purposes? I won't go through all. I'm sure we don't have all that time, but these are the kind of questions that we are asking ourselves. Starting, it's like an onion. We're peeling it off. Basis with the research that is, providing the evidence and looking at safety and efficacy. And then later on in real life, is it working or not? Is it effective and still safe for the patient? What kind of patient population are we using it for? And as I said previously, is it appropriate for that, local need? And is it implementable or not? And of course, and also a big question is it affordable? So and yeah, so sorry. Yeah. This is another way I always think HTA as a piece of puzzle, as a puzzle board, and there are different kind of evidence going into it, and but there's also intuitive decision making. So there are two in an HTA process. There is the one that we are providing the evidence, but there is also the appraisal part. And there you're bringing in different other kind of evidence, like social or environmental, local evidence that will help make decision. Again, the context matters. In for example, in technology assessment, we often in Africa we've come across that they're not evidence. We may have to collect evidence or data at the beginning to continue, or take data from similar settings so that we can use it and for our setting. So and collect data or do the data collection later on. So depends on the type of technology being assessed and in the setting that is being conducted and what kind of evidence that is available. So after all that, this is the definition, of HTA. Previously, there were lots of definition of HTA, and many of the organizations like HTAi, ISPOR, and other bodies came together to decide on, on a definition that would fit. And so it's a multidisciplinary process using explicit methods to determine the value of this technology, but not only at a time point, but at different points in its life cycle when you think about the technology life cycle. But at the end of the day, the purpose is to inform decision making and for better quality, healthcare quality for the patient, and also being, equitable to providing equitable healthcare. And it has many parts to it. I previously already mentioned that looking at the intended, but also consequences that were not, planned for. With the dimensions, you see there are a lot of dimensions out here. And you may be asking, are we looking always at all these dimensions? No, not necessarily. It depends upon the decisions. It depends upon what is the need, what kind of evidence is available. Also from which perspective are you taking? I, as a patient, must have a different perspective as a provider, as a hospital. So it depends upon what kind of, perspective are we looking at it. Sorry. And as I mentioned, which perspective we are taking, these are for some of the examples. You can use it for procurement, or guidance for treatment and for access to services. We mentioned about developing benefit care packages. Is some technology is going to be adopted or not, and so on. So there are different usage of health technology assessment. And as I mentioned, because it's a multidisciplinary process, I just can't do everything. Or Abhirup is a statistician. We need that, but we also need clinician or depending upon the technology, an engineer, or depending upon the dimension that is being the social and the patient or ethical dimension, then we need the ethicist. So it's a multidisciplinary, a teamwork actually, that what we need as to conduct a health technology assessment. And in many agencies, depending upon how big they are and how much resources is available, there are also librarians, information and communication specialists, who help the team in searching for evidence, in developing the PICO, and so on. So it depends upon the kind of resources available. So this is my case too, not necessarily very, actual. It is from 1975, and I won't go into, detail, but it's about a cost-benefit analysis being being asked, because the cost of the service is quite different from what's really of benefit, and also, and when you see the last sentence, the analysis suggests that society must look carefully at alternative uses before extending indiscriminately to large sections of the population this treatment. And I thought it was quite interesting because not exactly, but similarly, I came across a recent paper where they were talking about dialysis treatment in one of the developing countries, where they came about similar decision that you cannot, depending upon your need, then the home dialysis or dialysis at the hospital, and what kind of infrastructure is available in that particular setting. So it's not necessarily we are not, it's kind of the decisions can be very similar, even though so much time has passed. So when you think about, we're looking at the life cycle of the technology, and the life cycle of also, I think, of the HTA. So depending upon the life cycle of the technology, like Abhirup mentioned, he is active, or his work takes him to the early part of the technology development. So more and more that was not a mainstream HTA before, but more and more HTA is informing those kind of decisions on innovation, development of the technologies, if it should go, the no-go and go decisions. So there. And I just wanted to also show that what kind of uncertainty, at different points in the life cycle. So we are identifying data gaps during the trial period, and considering, what kind of early solutions that with these data gaps. And then when you go to the regulatory phase, assessing the impact, which leads to this uncertainty on the benefit risk assessment. And then during the product development, then we are looking at uncertainty in the product, and then we are going back to when it is time for disinvestment, which not necessarily may not happen. Then we are reassessing the uncertainties and thinking about, what are the mitigation strategies. So this is also more and more in some regions that this is also being looked at. How much time do I have?
5 to 7 minutes, I would say.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'll hurry up. So, so we're talking about the HTAi methods, but also the process that needs to happen. And you see actually before scoping also comes the prioritization. What kind of assessments, what kind of technologies need to be assessed, and it will depend on the of course the jurisdiction where depending upon what is the priority of the government or the hospital and so on. So we go through that phase of implementation and monitoring, and actually it should be a feedback loop and not a linear process. And for the assessment, you see, for example, you may have heard the UNETA model, or there is an integrate HTAi model. And for the contextualization, what I mentioned, the appraisal process, there a few years ago, there was this movement that deliberation should take place, or appraisal. But it's not only deliberation on, on quantitative data that is being available, but also qualitative data, right? So, and that qualitative data that also should be collected and provided, so that the decisions or the appraisal from the assessment is then contextualized. But because not always you have the quantitative data. And I won't go into these, but there are, this is also from 2009. So we're already talking about deliberative process. But as far as I know, this was not, under discussion, the deliberative processes. And because it's for the decision makers, quantitative evidence or data is easier to make base their decisions using that kind of data is easier than to have qualitative data and for making their decisions. So that kind of methodology needs to be also discussed with those deciding. It's a multi-stakeholder decision or deliberation that needs to take place, how we are going to appraise technologies or, make those kind of decisions. And a deliberation also brings what we also want to see with HTAi: transparency, accountability in their decision, legitimacy, because that is not happening in many of our countries. So we would like to see more of this, but yeah, so maybe that's what we need to raise awareness about. So happy to share with you all if you're interested more on, this, where we see the uncertainty and what kinds of questions we are asking, when it comes to uncertainty, and how it can be mitigated using deliberation. I have a few slides there, but as Abhirup said, I do not have time for all of them. But I wanted to show you, during this deliberation, we could, as a team, ask this kind of questions. There's also the model. So there is also the model on taking into input, throughput, and output, and of course monitoring, evaluation, and monitoring, following it up using this kind of tools. So this is an example that from South Korea, and their deliberation was taking place on technology reassessment. The policymakers decided that they prioritized the assessments that were already conducted, and it could happen that depending upon what kind of evidence that were available, that the reassessment needed to take place for hyperthermia, and they were asking for additional radiation therapy. And when you see that when there was evidence presented, for a specific type of cancer, that it was found to be effective, but those making the decisions, they didn't recommend it. They didn't want to, have it in the benefit package. And even if it is used over 10 years, but still, they didn't want to include it because they thought that, the evidence is not enough to show that it is effective. So it's not necessarily positive, but it can be also negative depending upon the deliberation and also the evidence that is available. This is another example from Canada on precision oncology, and here you will see that they went to the managed access route, but they also went to collection of data and what kind of data is necessary, and then interpretation and deliberation and update of that decision. So there are other, not only doing assessment as such, but also reassessment when you think about the life cycle, as I said, not only of the technology, but life cycle of the HTAi. And I think that's my last slide. So saying that, it depends upon the developing countries. You'll say we have limited resources, but we cannot, afford such a, such a institution actually, in which assesses this technology, and we do not have the manpower. We keep on hearing there is, we do not have the capacity. People do not know how to assess technologies, but there are ways to mitigate that. There are ways to build those skills, and how to, effectively use the resources so that you can make a difference. Because I cannot take a HTA that's done by UK and put it into, into South Africa. It's not going to work. That technology that on the dual RDT, for example, is not used. It's used elsewhere. Then there may not be HTA on that. So it's and my population is different than your population. So, but there are parts of HTA that can be shared or adapted, but others assessments that need to be also conducted. So it doesn't, unfortunately, it doesn't fit all, but it has to be tailored depending upon the context. But we can still take global evidence. with that, I say thank you for having me.
Yeah.
And just
Thank you,
this is just a snapshot, and happy to take some questions. And we are happy to also have webinars which digs deeper into cases by cases. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Yeah, thank you. It was really insightful. Now moving on to, I think, Antonio, are you here?
I am here indeed. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Johnny, for a fantastic presentation. And thank you so much, Abhirup, for
Do I have to
and the rest
stop
of the...
presenting? No, it's okay.
I think you might have to stop sharing the
Okay.
screen.
Antonio, we can't see you. I think something's with your camera, maybe.
My camera is fine. It's active.
Okay.
I think it's as soon as I move on to the PowerPoint, my camera stops working.
Does that work?
Are you able to see my slides?
Yes.
At least?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And can you see me or?
No,
we cannot see
I
you,
think,
but you can move on.
Okay.
but you can.
Well,
you can move on with the slide.
My slides are more important than myself.
Yeah.
So let's focus on the slides then. Okay, great. Okay, so this is more a presentation about the role of statisticians. Gianni has given a great presentation about health technology assessment, but this is more about the role of statisticians within health technology assessment. And prior to going into the details, I will talk a little bit about my journey, because I assume that some of the members of the audience are also statisticians or are studying or learning statistics. And it all started, I had finished doing a master's degree in machine learning, and then I got funding for doctoral training in statistics in London, in University College London. And I essentially needed a way of supporting myself because London is an expensive city. And at the time, my PhD supervisor, he had a very close relationship with consultancy companies that did support for health technology assessment and other pharmaceutical companies. And that's how I started doing consultancy work for contract research organizations. Contract research organizations, what they are, is that they are companies that provide services to pharmaceutical companies. Sometimes pharmaceutical companies outsource some of the work to contract research organizations. For instance, I believe that Abhirup is a HTA statistician for one of these companies, and that just comes to show that there are a lot of flavors to HTA statistics. And I think that there are two target audiences for this presentation. Firstly is those that are learning or studying statistics. You probably want to know what a HTA statistician does, a health technology assessment statistician. HTA is the acronym. And a lot of people ask me this question after I finished my master's in machine learning, because machine learning was hot, AI was hot, and people were wondering why I was getting into health technology assessment. They didn't know what that was. And also to the audience that has a background in health technology assessment, hopefully this presentation convinces you that, or hopefully you already know, that statisticians can provide some value to your work and to HTA decision making and health economics practice. Okay, so without further ado, I go into my presentation. By the way, just finally, I'm in the Methods and Outreach team at Novo Nordisk. Methods and Outreach, we focus on statistical innovation and developing new statistical methodology. And again, there are different roles for statisticians in pharmaceutical companies. This is a more innovation research-focused role, but there are also more traditional project statistician roles within HTA. And this comes to show that there is a lot of variety, even in something as specific as health technology assessment. There are many different flavors to what a HTA statistician can do. So without further ado, on to the next slide. Well, this has been covered very well already by Gianni, but what is health technology assessment?
Antonio, sorry.
Yes.
Your slides are not moving.
They're not moving. Okay. That is unfortunate.
Can you just put it on the slideshow?
Okay. Are they moving now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so health technology. Health technology is an intervention used to promote health, and that can be a pharmaceutical product or a medical device or a surgical intervention. And an assessment is required to inform policy decision making. And the assessment is multidisciplinary in the sense that, as discussed by Gianni, it covers many different aspects. But I would say that when it comes to the role of statisticians, we are mainly involved in the clinical efficacy or effectiveness aspect, and also partly involved in the economic aspect. So in drug development, there are many different stages. The first three hurdles, so to speak, are determining whether a new intervention is safe, efficacious, and whether it has quality in the production processes. And then comes health technology assessment, which deals more with clinical effectiveness and cost effectiveness. So what is the difference between efficacy and effectiveness? Efficacy is more about the effects under ideal and controlled circumstances as would be observed in a randomized trial, and a randomized trial provides the greatest internal validity of any experiment. But health technology assessment is more about effectiveness, which is about whether an intervention is producing an effect in real world conditions that reflect routine clinical practice in the healthcare system of a specific setting or country. And then finally, cost effectiveness is the trade-off between clinical effectiveness and the cost of an intervention in clinical practice. That would be the value of a new treatment. And a pharmaceutical company, what it does is that they submit certain dossiers, HTAi evidence, to payers or agencies that reimburse treatments to demonstrate that their treatment is cost effective and has value with respect to other interventions that are already out there in the market. And that would be overcoming that fourth hurdle. So HTAi is normally classified as a late phase activity, as something that occurs relatively late in the drug development process. HTAi requires a very specific skill set because it involves a very rapidly changing environment. Different HTAi agencies or payers have different requirements. For instance, Germany, they focus on effectiveness, but the UK focuses on cost effectiveness. It is also a cross-functional effort within a pharmaceutical company. There are many functions, typically market access or HEOR functions at the global or local level. They're the ones in charge of these HTA submissions, and then they require support from statisticians, from programmers, from medical writers that are writing up dossiers, and maybe potentially with people from a clinical background, decision sciences, epidemiology, health economics background. And this is a quickly changing environment because different agencies have different requirements. The methodological guidelines are constantly changing, and the designs can be really different. The ways of approaching an analysis can be very different, and the processes can be, again, very different between different countries. And there's a very domain-specific knowledge required. If you are a clinical development or traditional regulatory statistician, there probably is a book where you can learn most of the statistics that is required. Whereas for HTAi, there is not really a dedicated resource for turning into a HTAi statistician. You need to borrow from different disciplines. And in that way, it departs from traditional clinical development or regulatory biostatistics, which perhaps is a bit more traditional or conservative in its focus. In HTAi, there are many different stakeholders, as I said earlier, and they all have slightly different requirements. For instance, NICE in the United Kingdom, they focus more on cost effectiveness and on cost utility analysis. and other agencies in Germany, they focus exclusively on effectiveness. There is now, I believe, in India, a new framework being put into place for HTA evaluation, although, to be honest, this is not my area of expertise. Maybe Abhirup knows a little bit more. But I know that in developing countries, or let's say in many different parts of the world, there's now being an effort to establish HTA agencies, and again, there are probably many differences and many nuances with the way that the assessment of health technology is assessed in different countries. For instance, in Spain, I'm based in Spain. I'm Spanish. We are poorer than in Northern Europe in general, and we focus a lot on budget impact because maybe we don't have that much of a budget, and this is a primary consideration when dealing on whether we reimburse a treatment. So on whether we pay for a treatment, the social security system pays for a treatment or not. Maybe in Northern Europe, this is not that much of a consideration. But for instance, in Spain and in Italy, it is more of a consideration. Moving on to the differences between what a traditional biostatistician in a pharmaceutical company does, a statistician working on clinical development or on regulatory statistics, and someone working on health technology assessment does. Again, a clinical development statistician maybe focuses more on clinical efficacy and safety, whereas a HTA statistician focuses on effectiveness in real-world clinical practice, and that trade-off between effectiveness and cost, that value that is provided by the new medicine. Regulatory focuses on more traditional hypothesis testing. An experiment is designed to see whether results are going to be significant or not, and there's much focus on that p-value and on significance testing, whereas on HTA there's more of a focus on the magnitude of the treatment effect and on quantifying uncertainty, so confidence intervals or credible intervals. There are different ways of posing the questions of interest in regulatory statistics. Estimands are used. In HTA statistics, there is a focus on PICOs for the policy question, population intervention, comparator outcome. And really, I'd say that what differentiates regulatory and HTA statistics, one of the primary differentiating factors is the evidence base. Regulatory statistics depends on one or a few pivotal clinical trials that have been designed to obtain regulatory approval, whereas in HTA, we often rely on secondary data sources. For instance, maybe one of our treatments, Novo Nordisk's treatment, has not been compared against a competing intervention in a randomized trial, and we need to perform indirect comparisons against treatments that have not been compared head-to-head in an RCT. In that sense, HTA requires comparing our treatment versus any other option that is in the market, whether this is not necessarily the case in the regulatory world. You can get a treatment approved based on a comparison versus placebo or standard of care alone. And finally, I'd say that regulatory statistics, there's a strict multiplicity strategy in the sense that multiple testing is more well-defined in protocols, whereas in HTA statistics, we improvise a little bit more, and there's a less strict multiplicity strategy. Many HTA agencies do require post-hoc analyses. So this is just a brief introduction of what the differences are between a traditional clinical biostatistician and a HTA statistician. With respect to skills to be successful as a HTA statistician, and by the way, this slide is adapted from a poster that was presented by Scheppers, Saure, and Petelkau from Boehringer Ingelheim on HTA, how the landscape is changing, and how data scientists can upskill to changes in the regulation that are currently taking place. I'd say that definitely a big part of the role is not exclusively related to your educational background and knowledge about statistical methodology. Of course, that this is important to understand changes that there might be in the guidelines and to challenge certain feedback. but it's definitely important to have some strategic thinking, statistical leadership and negotiation, teamwork, communication, so the soft skills, basically, because it's less set in stone what someone needs to do from a HTA perspective. There's a lot more flexibility, and there are more opportunities to influence the way that things are done. I'd say that perhaps in regulatory or clinical development, there is a very specific way of doing things and a way that in which things have been done throughout many years. But in HTA, the landscape is rapidly evolving, the methodologies are rapidly evolving, and in that sense, there's more of an opportunity to shape what the teams are doing within a company and the decision-making process as a statistician. In terms of HTA-specific statistical methodologies, when I mentioned earlier that there's really no textbook or not one source to become a HTA statistician, what I mean is that HTA statistics, it borrows from a lot of different disciplines that are not necessarily statistical, but that involve a heavy use of statistics. I'd say that perhaps a main area of importance for HTA in terms of statistics is evidence synthesis. So as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the times in HTA, you do not have a direct experiment, a direct randomized trial comparing the interventions that are of interest. And sometimes you need to perform indirect comparisons between your treatment and another treatment that has not been compared in a head-to-head trial. I'd say that this is a very important area. Patient-reported outcomes. When you're trying to determine whether a patient is cost-effective, sometimes you use a decision model or a health economic model where patients are transitioning between different health states, and the utility is associated to each of those health states, and those utilities are normally estimated from patient-reported outcomes or from questionnaires such as the EQ5D. So a big part of the role of HTA statisticians involves using those questionnaires to estimate a utility that is associated to a different health state. And of course, these health states also have costs, and patients, they transition throughout the model. And that is how you determine eventually whether an intervention is cost effective or not. This is a cost utility analysis framework that is used, for instance, in the UK. Observational data analysis, I'd say that causal inference definitely is a hot topic. There is now increased use of real world data from electronic health records that most of the time is observational. It's not randomized, so you need causal inference methods, covariate adjustment methods to adjust for differences in baseline characteristics between different groups of patients. And finally, survival analysis is also a very important area, because survival analysis, for this cost effectiveness or health economic modeling, many times you need to estimate mean survival, and that involves extrapolation beyond the follow-up of a trial. And for that, you use certain survival analysis approaches like parametric survival models, more advanced models, depending on the therapeutic area. In oncology, there are very flexible and specific models. And this is beyond the traditional Cox regression. No, maybe in traditional clinical development regulatory statistics, there is more of a focus on models like the Cox proportional hazards model, but here, because of that necessity to extrapolate, we look into different types of models. Okay, I'm now reaching the end of this presentation, but I'd like to focus on the role of HTA statistician in the pharmaceutical company. Again, the role of HTA statistician might be a little bit different in a contract research organization. It might be a little bit different in the public sector, but in a pharmaceutical company, it's essentially the development of statistical analysis plans for our clinical trials, so that we ensure that these meet the requirements by HTA agencies and different payers, and so that we can see how many resources we allocate to a certain task, and therefore ensure that the statistical analysis are not only meeting regulatory needs, but also HTA needs. Oversight of different external vendors that are providing certain tasks for us, because there's work that pharmaceutical companies outsource, and to ensure that knowledge transfer is of an appropriate quality. Supporting market access or HUR functions within the pharmaceutical company and exchanges with different agencies and payers, and addressing requests from different agencies, and implementing methodologies that are specific to HTA, and helping build competencies and capacities in those specific methodologies, also when it comes to programming. And again, involvement in cross-functional teams, and here is where leadership is particularly important, to make sure that the analyses are statistically sensible. And finally, some resources. Again, there's not a single textbook to learn HTA statistics, but in my journey, something that really helped me at the beginning was the technical support documents from the NICE Decision Support Unit. NICE is the HTA agency in England and Wales. Also, ISPOR, which is the Professional Society for HEOR, which stands for Health Economics and Outcomes Research, which is an area very closely linked to health technology assessment. They have good practices reports, and there are subtopics which are of particularly interest to statisticians, such as the one in methodological and statistical research. This is not a statistical document, the Newcomer's Guide to HTA. That is simply to get more familiarity with what health technology assessment is. And then finally, just keeping up to date maybe with relevant journals in the field. I'd say that in particular for HTA, value and health, medical decision making, research synthesis methods for evidence synthesis, and statistics in medicine also has sometimes some HTA relevant and HEOR, health economics relevant articles as well in particular. To conclude, working in HTA as a statistician requires a very specific and particular skill set. HTA is evolving very quickly, processes, guidance, regulations. HTA statistical work can be quite different from work in traditional clinical development statistics, and HTA business needs are growing. So there is a high unmet need for statisticians with this particular skill set, because of changes in the regulations, and because changes in how different HTA systems are making decisions. The demand for HTA statisticians is increasing, and this will affect the current workflow and further increase demands for statisticians everywhere, in pharmaceutical companies, in agencies, in the public sector, in contract research organizations and consultancy companies. So this is definitely an area that is growing and where statisticians can add value. Well, thank you very much. And that is the end of my presentation. And if you have any questions, also feel free to contact me. And that is my LinkedIn, by the way. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Antonio. It was great. So just to conclude that, it was, first of all, we learned that HT is a multidisciplinary process, and it's just not limited to just the health technology developers. It's all about the assessments that take place, and it's not even only statisticians who do this assessments. It's a multidisciplinary team. So I guess moving on, we might have much more within the Indian community of statisticians who are here today, that since India is just going through the initial phases and the nascent stages of developing a whole-fledged HTA framework, and even all of the developing countries where it's still not institutionalized, where still the policy documents are still lying out there somewhere, but still not fully institutionalized that we see in India. But I think it's all about creating awareness, and I think this webinar was a first step in that direction, and my help. And I thank the IISA and DCIG, as well as Antonio and Gianni, specifically to be coming aboard and helping us doing this. And I think there is the shifts that are happening, for example, the EU HTAi regulation, which is more on the joint clinical assessments that would require a number of indirect treatment comparisons, and the role of the statistician would get elevated, because these are things which are best handled by a statistician. So I guess just to conclude that it was a great learning opportunity, and do we have some time to take few questions, I guess. I think we are 6 minutes above time, but I think it's if somebody has any question, please feel free to ask. I think Debjani.
Abhirup, this is I think we are already ahead of time, so I will actually say that please contact Yanni and Antonio for the questions, and as Antonio just mentioned, we can paste your LinkedIn profile so that people can reach out to you directly. However, I would like to take this opportunity to thank both of you, actually three of you, including Abhirup and because as you just properly mentioned, even if you are a biostatistician in a regulatory setting, you might not know what is happening in HTA, and you require some skill set, and also we can take honestly a leadership role in the HTA areas. So thank you so much. We learned something new today, and I hope all the people in the call at least learned that where we can use the statistics. And I also want to thank the webinar committee who is relentlessly working to make it work. So thank you, Jyotishko, Himel, Piali, and Kaushik. And thank you all. And we will be posting the video on our LinkedIn channel. Thank you again. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Have a great
much.
day.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.